Well, welcome to another Memphis Monday 232, the 24th video of year 5. Hatchet's all ready, I'm all ready, so we're going to get started. I got to apologize for last week. The sound was just terrible. I got a new sound system I rigged up this week, so hopefully it'll be better. But I got fans in here and all that stuff, and it really messes up my sound system. But today what we're going to do is we're going to make some I want to say plantation shutters. They're shutters on the inside of the room. My wife wants them like country style. She doesn't even want them painted. She wants them rustic, but they're really not plantation shutters because they don't have louvers in them. They're actually, well, let me. I'll go through all that in just a minute. We're talking too much. Let's knock off the chit chat and get to work. You know, it seems like half the work I get comes off from pictures people see on the internet. Well, this is old school, and this inspiration comes from a picture my wife saw in a magazine, one of those how to decorate your home magazine, and she saw these plantation shutters in this in this room decor here. And she said, "Can you make these for me?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." So this is a picture of the prototype I put together. She said she liked it just the way it was. Let me see if it's kind of washed out by the sunlight. Let me get in closer where you can see it. So the outer one was made with 4 boards, and it's got these gate hinges. The reason I called it a picket fence design, picket fence handle, and then it can crank out just like that. Okay, let's go see how we build it. Here's a sketch I did of our project. One of the things I think that make this design sing is these boards, the pickets here, are 5.5 inches. And what's special about 5.5 inches is that's a standard width of a board. That is the width of a board that our eye is accustomed to seeing. And that's satisfying in the design whenever you have something that's recognizable. The frame board over here that the hinges are attached to, that's 2 3/4 inches, which is half of 5.5. These may seem like trivial numbers, but I think they make the project sing. Okay, what we got to do is figure out a way to make sure this thing is perfectly square in that frame and that all the gaps are exactly right. You got it. We got a jig in our future. So I set up this little jig. It is just a simple frame. These 2 cleats here are exactly 32 inches apart, and these spacers right here are 1/4 inch to get the spacing between the boards. Let's cut the boards and see if we can make this thing sing. Now, not only does the 5.5 inch boards kind of make the project flow, 5.5 inches is how one of the standard lengths of boards. So that makes it real convenient. So now I got my boards cut. They're all cut 32. I'll just put them in the jig. put my spacer between the boards. Now, this jig may seem like an overkill for such a simple project, but I'll tell you, it wouldn't be a simple project if you had this thing laid out on the garage floor trying to make this thing square. You might be able to do it, but I couldn't. Okay. Okay, now our pickets are all lined up. There's our frame. Goes right there. Okay, now continuing the 5.5 inch theme, I got this one of the boards we're using, putting it here on my jig. I made that jig proud of my piece. So now that will align my brace so that it's perfectly square with my pickets. And then I'll be putting the whole mess together with staples that just almost go through. Okay, one thing you may notice is, you know, I'm always talking about keeping the gun perpendicular to the surface, because you don't want your staples or brads to flare out. Well, in this case, I kind of want them to flare out. I want them to, I want them to get as much hold as possible, and there's nothing to flare out and break the surface on. So I'm kind of putting them in diagonally. The shutters are recessed into the window opening somewhat. So what I got to do is put a spacer in there, and then this bracket that the bracket that the shutter hangs from is elevated when I put the hinges on. This is another one of those easy jobs that would be difficult if it wasn't for the jig. You know, keeping, you know, the frame here exactly spaced and square while you're fiddling with all the rest of this. Very difficult. That might be another takeaway too right there. You really need more than one drill. You know, they're getting pretty cheap. Go out there and buy you two, at least two. I got about 10. Because you don't want to be changing bits. You just reach for a different screwdriver. This is a perfect example about that takeaway about having multiple drivers. This is the countersink for the frame here. I'm going to put 3 countersinks in this thing to mount this thing. This is the pre-drill for the screws, and then this is the screwdriver. So by having multiple drivers, I don't have to change bits and all that business. Okay, I want these countersinks to be right in the center. You know, I think I'm putting this handle on upside down. That's how I put the other one on. But let's don't install it until we take it out of the jig, because sometimes taking things out of jigs can be funny. Okay, get the spacers out now. They're nice and tight. That came out. That one came out. Well, sorta. Yeah, there it goes. Okay, there it is. All the spacing right. Let's go install it. Okay, this is one of the shorter ones. It's going to go on the left side here. I got a spacer under here, 3/4 of an inch. That'll keep it level and positioned. And last thing we did back in the shop was countersink those screws. Okay, the spacer keeps it plumb to the window opening, and all I can do is put these screws in. I got screws that are just short enough to go through the wood. Okay, let's test drive this thing. Take the spacer out. And there it is. Well, I'm getting the middle one set up here. It's the same principle. I'm just using, it's just taller and wider, so I just spread my cleats out. The other one was 30. The outside shutters were 32 inches. These are 40. So I just spread my cleats out to 40 inches. But my brackets are positioned the same way, so they'll line up with the other. Okay, all I got to do now is install it just like we did the other one. Okay, now all I got to do is take the spacer out and test drive it. Oh, spacer won't come out. There it is. There we go. Okay, there's our picket fence shutters. They're not technically plantation shutters because they don't have shutters, but we copied them out of a magazine, reproduced them, except we didn't paint them white. Well, that does it for Memphis Monday 232, the 24th video of year 5. Today we built a picket fence inspired set of plantation shutters. If you're a woodworker, you'll find out that 80% of your work is inspired by some picture somebody got out of a magazine or on the internet, and you need to be able to take those pictures and turn them into real plans and execute. And so we went through some of those procedures today. But even though this was a simple project, it could have been quite a bit more difficult had I not used the jig. When you're making gates and windows and anything that has to be square, it's much easier and more accurate to make some kind of a jig, a squaring jig. Okay, just rambling on. like and favorite and tweak and poke and all the stuff you do on the internet. Most important, make sure you're back here next week for another exciting Memphis Monday. Thanks for playing along.